Get out! The words tore through the thunder like a knife. Jessie looked up from the rain-soaked driveway, water streaming down her face, one hand clutching her swollen belly. Audra Harrison stood in the mansion's doorway, backlit by golden light, her designer dress untouched by the storm. "You don't belong here anymore, waitress. Please." Jessie's voice cracked. "I just lost my husband. Your brother, Horace, is dead." Georgina stepped forward, umbrella angled like a weapon. "And so is your free ride." Jessie's knees buckled. She steadied herself against the cold stone, feeling the baby kick inside her. "I have nowhere to go, just one night, until the storm." "You want shelter?" Audra's lips curled into something cruel. "Then earn it." The youngest sister, Cindy, laughed from beneath her yellow raincoat. "Make her beg properly, Audra, on her knees." Jessie's breath caught. "What?" "You heard her." Audra descended one step, then another. "Kneel, prove you understand your place, then maybe we'll consider letting you stay in the servants' quarters. And before we go any further, pause for a second. If you believe no woman deserves to be humiliated like this, if you'd never stand with people like Audra, Georgina, and Cindy, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't let their kind win. Comment below, "No one deserves this," if you agree that karma should find them fast, and tell me, where are you watching from tonight? Now, back to Jessie, because the storm outside was nothing compared to the one she was about to unleash. For a moment, Jessie didn't move. Lightning flashed, illuminating the three women, her husband's sisters, who'd smiled at her over Sunday dinners just weeks ago. "Please don't make me kneel or leave." Audra's voice was ice. "Your choice." Jessie's legs trembled. The rain felt like needles against her skin. She thought of the baby, of Horace's last whispered promise. "I'll always protect you." Her white dress was already ruined, soaked through and clinging to her pregnant frame. What did pride matter now? What did dignity matter when she had nowhere else to go? Slowly, she lowered herself to the stone. Cold water pooled beneath her knees. Her hands braced against the cobblestone to keep from falling forward. "There." Her voice was barely audible over the storm. "I'm kneeling. Please, just let me inside. Just for tonight." Audra stared down at her for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she turned to her sisters. "What do you think, girls? Should we let the gold digger stay?" Georgina tilted her head, studying Jessie like an insect under glass. "I don't know. She doesn't look very sincere." "I agree," Cindy said, her voice sickly sweet. "Maybe she should crawl to the door, show us she really means it." Jessie's stomach lurched. "No, please, Crawl," Audra repeated, her eyes glittering in the lightning. "Or leave. Last chance." Jessie felt something break inside her chest. Not her will that was already shattered. Something deeper. The part of her that had believed in human decency, in family, in the goodness of people she'd once called sisters. She looked up at Audra through the rain. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you trapped him?" Audra hissed, descending another step. "You got pregnant on purpose. You tricked my brother into marrying a nobody, a waitress from a greasy diner, and now you think you can just waltz into his fortune? I loved him." "You loved his money." Georgina's voice was sharp. "We all know what you are, Jessie, a leech, a parasite. Horace was too kind to see it, but we're not." Cindy laughed again, high and cruel. "Look at her, Audra. She's pathetic. Daddy always said Horace had terrible taste in women, but this?" The words landed like stones. Jessie felt tears mix with rain on her face. "I'm carrying his child, your nephew. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It means," Audra said coldly, "that you have one more reason to leech off this family. Well, not anymore. Horace is gone, and you're not welcome here." "But the funeral is over." Georgina snapped her umbrella shut with a sharp click. "Security should have escorted you out hours ago. Consider this your official eviction notice." Jessie's vision blurred, not from rain, but from the crushing weight of what was happening. "I don't understand. We were family. You welcomed me. You called me sister. We tolerated you for Horace's sake." Audra cut her off. "But he's gone now, and we're not about to let some opportunistic little tramp steal what's rightfully ours." "I'm not trying to steal anything." Really? Georgina reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded document. Then why did we find this in Horace's study? A copy of his will with your name all over it? Jessie's heart stopped. What? You didn't think we'd look? Audra's smile was venomous. Horace changed his will 3 months ago, right after he found out you were pregnant. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? I didn't know. Of course you didn't, Cindy mocked. You're so innocent, so helpless. Well, here's the thing, Jessie. We don't care what Horace wrote in some piece of paper. You're not getting a dime of his money, not while we're alive to stop it. Jessie tried to stand, her legs shaking. You can't just... We can do whatever we want. Audra's voice dropped to something dangerous. This is our family estate, our brother's legacy, and you're nothing but a stain on it. Lightning split the sky, so close Jessie felt the thunder in her bones. In that flash of white light, she saw their faces clearly, Audra's rage, Georgina's calculation, Cindy's twisted satisfaction. These weren't the women who'd hugged her at her wedding, who'd helped her pick out nursery colors, who'd promised to be there when the baby came. These were strangers, monsters wearing familiar faces. Please, Jessie whispered one last time. I'm begging you, I have nowhere to go, no money, I can't. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you seduced our brother. Audra turned on her heel. Georgina, call security. Have them remove this woman from the property. If she comes back, we'll file for a restraining order. Wait! Jessie lurched forward, slipping on the wet stone. Her hands scraped against the cobblestone as she caught herself. Please, just listen. But the door was already closing. One more thing, Jessie. Audra paused in the doorway, backlit like a demon in the warm light. If I ever see you near this house again, if you ever try to claim 1 penny of Horace's money, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. A gold-digging whore who got pregnant to trap a dying man. He wasn't dying, wasn't he? Audra's smile turned cruel. Funny how his car just happened to crash right after he changed his will. The implication hung in the air like poison. Then the door slammed shut with a finality that echoed through the storm. Jessie knelt there for a long time, paralyzed by shock. The rain pounded against her back. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, so thin she could see her pregnant belly outlined beneath the fabric. Horace. She closed her eyes and saw his face, his gentle smile, the way he'd touched her stomach and whispered to their baby, "You're going to be so loved, both of you." But now he was gone, and his sisters, the women who'd welcomed her into this family, had just thrown her out like garbage. A violent shiver ran through her body. She needed to move, needed to find shelter before she caught pneumonia, before something happened to the baby. But where could she go? Her parents were dead. Her few friends had drifted away after she married Horace, not because he'd isolated her, but because her life had become so different from theirs. Private jets and charity galas didn't mix well with community college study groups. She had no money. Horace had always handled their finances, and after he died, everything had been frozen pending estate resolution. She'd been living at the mansion, assuming that as his widow, she had a right to stay. She'd assumed wrong. Jessie forced herself to stand, her legs barely holding her weight. Water dripped from her hair, her dress pooling at her feet. She looked up at the mansion, 3 stories of pristine white stone, windows glowing with warmth she was no longer allowed to touch. Somewhere inside, Audra and her sisters were probably laughing, celebrating their victory. "You'll regret this," Jessie thought, but the words felt hollow. What could she do? She was 7 months pregnant, alone, and penniless. She turned away from the mansion and started walking down the long driveway. Each step felt heavier than the last. The iron gates loomed ahead, already closing automatically behind her. Lightning flashed again, illuminating something in the distance. A car parked just outside the estate. A black sedan with its headlights off. Jessie froze. The driver's side door opened. A man stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, holding an umbrella. He didn't approach her, just stood there watching. Fear spiked through her exhaustion. Had the sisters sent someone? But then he called out, his voice cutting through the rain. "Mrs. Harrison?" She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her throat was too tight with fear and grief. The man took a step forward, keeping his distance. My name is Jonathan Fuller. I was your husband's attorney. Jonathan Fuller. The name echoed somewhere in her memory. Horace had mentioned him once or twice, the only person I trust with everything. What do you want? Her voice came out raw, broken. To help you. Jonathan moved closer, close enough that Jessie could see his face in the lightning-sharp features, dark eyes, professional concern. I saw what they did. I've been waiting out here since the funeral ended. Why? Because I knew they'd do this. Jonathan held out the umbrella. Please, Mrs. Harrison, let me get you somewhere safe. Jessie stared at him, at the umbrella, at the dry warmth of his car just yards away. Every instinct screamed not to trust anyone, not after tonight. But what choice did she have? She took a step forward, then another. Her legs gave out halfway there, and Jonathan caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he said quietly. You're safe now. But as he helped her into the car, as the warmth of the heater hit her frozen skin, Jessie couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be safe again. Jonathan drove in silence for 10 minutes before speaking. Where are we going? Jessie finally asked, her voice hoarse. Somewhere the Harmon sisters won't find you. Not yet. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. There's a motel about 20 miles from here. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and private. I can't afford. It's taken care of. Jessie closed her eyes. Why are you helping me? Jonathan was quiet for a moment. The windshield wipers beat a steady rhythm against the rain. Because Horace asked me to. If anything ever happened to him, I was supposed to make sure you were protected. Protected from what? From them. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Your husband knew exactly what his sisters were capable of. He just didn't think. He didn't think he'd die so soon. Jessie's hand instinctively moved to her belly. The will, they said he changed it after I got pregnant. He did. Why didn't he tell me? Jonathan pulled into the motel parking lot, a rundown place with flickering neon signs and peeling paint. Because he wanted to wait until after the baby was born. He had reasons. What reasons? Jonathan turned to face her, his expression grave. Mrs. Harrison, I can't discuss the details of your husband's estate right now, not until certain conditions are met, but I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Jessie looked at this stranger, this man who claimed to be her husband's attorney, who'd been waiting outside the mansion in a storm, who now wanted her to trust him with her life. She had no choice. Okay, she whispered. Good. Jonathan handed her a key card and a thick envelope. Room 217. There's cash in here enough for a few weeks. Food, essentials, prenatal care. Use it. I'll pay you back. You don't need to. Jonathan's eyes softened slightly. Horace took care of everything. You just need to stay alive and healthy until the baby comes. Can you do that? Jessie nodded, tears threatening again. One more thing. Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me, day or night. Understood? She took the card with shaking hands. Jonathan R. Fuller, Brando and Fuller Attorneys, Chicago. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet, Mrs. Harrison. Jonathan's expression darkened. The Harmon sisters aren't going to let this go. They'll come looking for you. And when they find you. He trailed off. Just be careful. Trust no one except me. With that, he drove away, leaving Jessie standing in the rain once more, this time holding a key card to a motel room and an envelope full of cash. Inside room 217, Jessie finally allowed herself to collapse. The room was small and shabby-stained carpet, flickering fluorescent lights, the faint smell of cigarettes embedded in the walls. But it was warm, and it was safe. For now. She peeled off her soaked dress and stood under the shower until the hot water ran cold. Then she wrapped herself in the scratchy motel towel and sat on the bed, staring at the envelope Jonathan had given her. Inside was $3,000 in cash, and a note written in elegant script. Mrs. Harrison, your husband was a good man who loved you very much. What happened tonight was cruel and unjust, but it was not unexpected. Horace prepared for this. Trust the process. Trust me. And above all, protect yourself and your child. The truth will reveal itself in time. J.R. Fuller. Jessie read the note 3 times before it truly sank in. Horace had known. Known his sisters would turn on her. Known she'd need protection. And he'd planned for it. A sob broke free from her chest, grief and relief tangled together. She pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the baby move beneath her palms. "Your daddy loved us," she whispered. "He loved us so much." But even as she said it, doubt crept in. If Horace had known his sisters were dangerous, why hadn't he protected her better? Why leave her vulnerable to their cruelty? Why not tell her about the will, about whatever plans he'd made? And Audra's words echoed in her mind. Funny how his car just happened to crash right after he changed his will. Jesse's blood ran cold. No, it couldn't be. They were his sisters. They wouldn't. But she'd also thought they were her family, and tonight they'd thrown her into a storm like she was nothing. What else were they capable of? Jesse lay back on the thin motel mattress, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. Outside, the rain continued its assault. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and in a law office downtown, Jonathan Fuller sat at his desk, staring at a sealed envelope marked, "To be opened after the birth of the Harrison heir." Inside that envelope was a document that would change everything. A controlling share of Harrison Global Investments, worth $1 billion, all in Jesse Harrison's name. But Jonathan couldn't tell her. Not yet, not until the baby was born and the will could be legally executed. Until then, he could only watch and wait and pray that the Harmon sisters didn't find her first. Because if they discovered what Horace had truly left behind, Jesse's life wouldn't be worth the paper the will was written on. The first week passed in a fog of grief and survival. Jesse woke each morning to the sound of highway traffic and the musty smell of old carpet. The motel room had become her entire world. 4 walls painted the color of nicotine, a window that looked out onto a cracked parking lot, and a bathroom where the shower head dripped constantly, marking time in a slow, maddening rhythm. She'd stopped counting the days. What did it matter? Monday felt the same as Friday when you had nowhere to go and no one to see. The cash Jonathan had given her was already dwindling. $200 for the first week's rent, $50 for food, mostly crackers and canned soup from the gas station next door, $20 for laundry at the coin-op down the street because she couldn't keep wearing the same maternity dress she'd salvaged from the mansion. She did the math obsessively, sitting on the edge of the bed with bills spread across the comforter. At this rate, she had maybe 3 weeks before the money ran out completely. And then what? The baby kicked, a sharp jab against her ribs that made her gasp. Jessie pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the small foot push back against her palm. "I know," she whispered. "I know you're hungry. Me too." Sunday dinners at the Harrison estate had always been Horace's favorite tradition. Jessie could still see him at the head of the massive dining table, carving the roast with steady hands while he told stories about his father, about building the business from nothing, about learning to trust your instincts over spreadsheets. Audra would sit at his right, playing the dutiful eldest. Georgina at his left, always calculating. Cindy would laugh too loud at his jokes, trying to be his favorite. And Jesse would sit beside him, his hand finding hers under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her wrist. "This is what family is supposed to be," he'd told her once, after everyone else had gone to bed. They'd stood together in the kitchen, her back against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist. People who show up for each other, who protect each other. She'd turned in his arms to kiss him. "I love your family." "And they love you," he'd promised. Liar. Jessie jolted back to the present, tears streaming down her face. She wiped them away angrily, hating herself for crying, hating Horace for leaving her, hating his sisters for proving that everything she'd believed was a lie. Her fingers found the locket around her neck, the only piece of jewelry she'd managed to keep. Inside was a photo from their wedding day, both of them laughing, his hand on her barely visible baby bump. She opened it now, staring at their faces. "Daddy promised he'd never leave," she whispered to her belly. "He promised we'd be safe, that he'd take care of us." The baby kicked again, softer this time. I know he didn't mean to break his promise, but the words felt hollow, because Horace had left, whether by accident or design. He'd left her alone with $3,000 and a lawyer who spoke in riddles about conditions and timing. What good were promises from a dead man? By the second week, Jessie had developed a routine. Wake at dawn when the truckers started their engines, shower in lukewarm water because the hot ran out after 3 minutes, eat half a protein bar and save the rest for dinner, walk to the gas station for bottled water and whatever was on sale. Then back to the room, back to the silence, back to waiting for something, anything to change. The vending machine on the second floor became her primary food source, stale chips for $1, candy bars that made her nauseous but gave her enough sugar to function. Once, she splurged on a package of cookies and ate the entire thing while crying on the bathroom floor. The baby was growing. She could feel it, the way her belly had dropped lower, the way simple tasks like tying her shoes had become impossible. She needed prenatal vitamins. She needed a doctor. She needed to know her baby was okay. But the free clinic Jonathan had mentioned was 6 miles away, and she had no car. The bus came twice a day, and the fare was $3 each way. She'd go tomorrow, she told herself, or the day after, when she could afford to spare the money. On day 9, the motel clerk knocked on her door. Jessie opened it a crack, the chain still latched. Yes? The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with deep lines around her eyes, glanced over her shoulder before speaking. "Someone's been calling, asking about you." Jessie's heart stopped. "What?" "Man called twice yesterday, once this morning, wanted to know if we had a Jesse Harrison registered." "What did you tell him?" The clerk shrugged. "Told him we don't give out guest information, but," she lowered her voice, "he offered me $200 for your room number." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Jessie's feet. "Did you take it?" "No." The clerk's expression softened slightly. "I got 3 daughters. I know what running looks like, but I can't guarantee the night clerk will do the same. He's broke and desperate." Jessie's throat tightened. "Thank you for warning me." The clerk nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "You got somewhere else to go? Someone you can call?" "Jonathan." "Maybe," Jessie managed. "Then call them. Tonight." The clerk's eyes held genuine concern. "Whatever you're running from, honey, they're catching up." After the clerk left, Jessie sat on the bed and tried to think through her panic. It had to be Jonathan checking on her. He was the one who'd put her here, who'd given her the cash. Of course he'd call to make sure she was okay. Except, why not call her directly? She'd given him her number. Unless it wasn't Jonathan at all. Jessie's gaze fell on the nightstand drawer where she'd hidden Horace's folder, the one she'd grabbed from his study the morning of the funeral, while his sisters were busy greeting guests. She'd forgotten about it in the chaos of that night, in the horror of being thrown out. But now she pulled it free, her hands trembling. "Fuller, Confidential" was written across the front in Horace's neat handwriting. Inside were documents she didn't fully understand, letters marked private and privileged, bank statements with numbers that made her dizzy, and a handwritten note dated 2 weeks before his death. "If you're reading this, something has happened to me. Do not trust my sisters. Do not tell them about the transfers. Jonathan Fuller knows everything. He will protect you when the time is right. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you sooner. I love you. Always, H." Jessie read it 3 times, her pulse pounding in her ears. Transfers. What transfers? The time is right. When? And most terrifying, if something has happened to me. Not if I die. Not if there's an accident. If something has happened, as if he'd known, as if he'd seen it coming. She shoved the folder back into the drawer, her mind racing. If Horace had suspected he was in danger, if he'd hidden money or assets or something from his sisters, then they'd come looking. And if they found her before Jonathan executed whatever plan Horace had left behind, she was as good as dead. Jessie grabbed her phone with shaking hands and pulled up Jonathan's number. But before she could dial, a text came through from an unknown number. "Stay where you are. Don't answer the door. Don't talk to anyone. I'm handling it. JRF." Her breath came out in a rush. Jonathan knew. He knew someone was looking for her. Another text, "PS grocery delivery coming tomorrow morning. Answer the door for that. Only password is Harrison. Don't open for anyone who doesn't say it." Jessie clutched the phone to her chest, relief and fear warring inside her. She wasn't alone. Not completely. But she also wasn't safe. 50 miles away, in a sleek downtown office overlooking the Chicago River, Jonathan Fuller ended a call and stared at the name flashing on his second phone. "Unknown number." He answered. "Fuller. She's alive." The voice was male, rough, unfamiliar. Motel off Route 55. Been there 9 days. Jonathan's jaw tightened. And my employer wants to know what you're planning to do about it. Tell your employer, Jonathan said coldly, that Mrs. Harrison is under my legal protection. Any attempt to contact or harm her will result in immediate legal action. Legal action? The man laughed. Your client's widow is sitting in a Roach motel eating vending machine food. Some protection. She's exactly where she needs to be. Is she? A pause. Because from where I'm standing, she looks like an easy target. Jonathan's hand tightened around the phone. If anything happens to her, relax, counselor. I'm just an observer, for now. The line went dead. Jonathan sat in the darkness of his office, his mind working through scenarios, contingencies, risks. Georgina, it had to be Georgina. She was the smart one, the one who'd think to hire a private investigator. Audra was too impulsive, too emotional, Cindy too weak, but Georgina was dangerous precisely because she was patient. He dialed his assistant. I need a security detail. Discreet surveillance on the Route 55 motel, room 217. No direct contact with the subject, just eyes. How long? Until I say otherwise. He hung up and pulled out the sealed envelope from his safe, the one marked with Horace's handwriting, the one he couldn't open for another 8 weeks. Just hang on, Mrs. Harrison, he muttered. Just a little longer. Because once that baby was born, once the will was unsealed, Jessie Harrison would become the most powerful and most hunted woman in Illinois. And there was nothing Jonathan could do to stop what was coming, only prepare her for it. The Harrison estate study smelled of leather, mahogany, and their father's cologne, a scent that had lingered long after he died, as if the old man refused to leave the room where he'd built his empire. Audra sat in his chair now, behind the massive desk, her fingers drumming against the polished wood. Georgina stood by the window, watching the gardeners trim the hedges with mechanical precision. Cindy perched on the leather sofa, nervously twisting a tissue between her hands. Between them, on the coffee table, sat a stack of documents that Arthur Pembroke, their family accountant for 30 years, had just finished explaining, or trying to explain. Say that again, Audra said, her voice dangerously calm. Slowly this time. Arthur adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, his discomfort evident. The bulk of Mr. Harrison's liquid assets, his investment accounts, offshore holdings, and the controlling shares of Harrison Global are currently frozen pending the fulfillment of a legal condition. What condition? Georgina turned from the window, her expression unreadable. The birth of his heir. Arthur cleared his throat. According to the terms Mr. Harrison established with his attorneys, the estate cannot be fully distributed until after his child is born and paternity is legally confirmed. Silence fell over the room like a shroud. Then Audra stood, her chair scraping against the hardwood. You're telling me that waitress has to give birth before we can access Horace's money? Not access, precisely. The residual accounts, the ones covering the estate's operational expenses, remain available, but the majority of his wealth is held in trust until she drops that bastard, Audra finished, her voice rising. Until she produces an heir that might not even be Horace's. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Harrison's child is presumed legitimate under... I don't care about presumptions. Audra slammed her hand on the desk. I care about our brother's fortune being held hostage by some opportunistic gold digger who probably got pregnant by the pool boy. Cindy flinched. Audra, don't what? Don't say what we're all thinking? Audra's eyes blazed. Horace changed his will 3 months ago, right after she announced the pregnancy. Convenient, don't you think? Georgina moved to the sideboard and poured herself a scotch, neat. What else did the will say, Arthur? I'm not privy to the complete details. Only Brando and Fuller have access to the full document. Arthur pulled a folder from his briefcase. What I do know is that Mr. Harrison made significant transfers in the months before his death, restructured several holding companies, moved assets around in ways that frankly don't make sense from a tax perspective. Moved them where? Audra demanded. That's what I'm trying to determine, but every time I request documentation, Jonathan Fuller's office sends me these. Arthur slid a stack of letters across the desk. Each one was identical. The information you've requested is sealed pursuant to attorney-client privilege and cannot be disclosed at this time." Georgina took a long sip of scotch. "So Fuller knows everything, and we know nothing." "Essentially, yes." "How much?" Cindy asked quietly. "How much of Horace's estate is frozen?" Arthur hesitated. "Approximately 92%. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 92%, Audra repeated slowly. "So we're living off 8% of our brother's fortune while that woman—" "She's living in a motel," Georgina interrupted, "eating vending machine food and probably terrified we're going to come after her." She turned to face her sisters, her expression cold and calculating. "Which, to be fair, we did throw her out in a storm." "She deserved it," Cindy muttered, though her voice lacked conviction. "Did she?" Georgina raised an eyebrow. "Or did we just make ourselves look like the villains in whatever little drama Horace orchestrated?" Audra's jaw tightened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying our brother was smarter than we gave him credit for." Georgina finished her drink and set the glass down with a decisive click. "He knew exactly what would happen when he died. Knew we'd turn on her. Probably counted on it." "That's insane," Cindy said. "Horace loved us." "Horace loved her." Georgina's voice was bitter. "And apparently, he trusted her more than he trusted his own blood." Arthur cleared his throat. "If there's nothing else, I should—" "There is something else." Georgina walked to the desk and pulled out an envelope from her purse. She dropped it in front of Audra. "I hired someone to find her." Audra's eyes narrowed. "When?" 3 days after the funeral, the night you burned her clothes in the fireplace." Georgina's smile was thin. "I figured it was only a matter of time before we needed leverage." She opened the envelope and spread photographs across the desk. Jessie at the motel. Jessie at the gas station. Jessie entering a building downtown. Arthur leaned forward, squinting. "Is that Brando and Fuller's office?" Georgina tapped the photo. "She met with Jonathan Fuller 4 days ago. Spent 2 hours inside." Audra snatched up the photograph, her face flushing with rage. "That snake, he's been helping her this whole time." "Of course he has." Georgina poured herself another scotch. "Horace probably paid him a fortune to make sure she was taken care of." "We should fire him," Cindy said. "Hire our own lawyers." "We can't." Arthur's voice was apologetic. "Mr. Harrison named Brando and Fuller as the exclusive executors of his estate. Any attempt to remove them would require court approval, which could take months, and given that Mrs. Harrison is pregnant, any judge would side with her," Georgina finished. "The poor widow carrying her dead husband's child, how sympathetic." Audra stared at the photo of Jessie entering the law office, her knuckles white where she gripped the paper. "How much does she know?" "About what?" "About the will, the transfers, about how much Horace actually left her." Georgina shrugged. "My investigator says Fuller's keeping her in the dark, probably until after the baby's born." "Why?" "Because Horace was thorough." Georgina's voice took on a grudging respect. "He didn't just leave her money, he left her a chess game. Set up the pieces so that no matter what we do, she wins." "Unless she doesn't live long enough to collect," Audra said softly. The room went very still. Arthur stood abruptly, gathering his papers with shaking hands. "I think I should go." "Yes," Georgina said without looking at him. "That would be best." After he left, Cindy finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Audra, you can't be serious." "Why not?" Audra's eyes were cold, calculating. "She's alone, vulnerable. Pregnant women have complications all the time. Tragic, but not suspicious." "That's murder," Cindy whispered. "That's survival." Audra threw the photo down. "Do you want to spend the rest of your life living off table scraps while that waitress sits in our house spending our money raising her brat in Horace's bed?" "It's not our money," Georgina said quietly. "That's what you're not understanding. It was never ours. Horace made sure of that." "Because of her," Audra's voice cracked. "Because she manipulated him, seduced him, got pregnant." "Or maybe," Georgina interrupted, "he actually loved her. Maybe she made him happy in a way we never did. Ever consider that?" Audra's face twisted with fury. "How dare you?" "How dare I?" Georgina laughed, sharp and humorless. "You threw her into a storm, Audra. You made her kneel. You humiliated her at her own husband's funeral. And now you're surprised that Horace protected her from us? He was our brother. And she was his wife." Georgina's voice was like ice. "Whether we like it or not." Cindy stood, her face pale. "I can't listen to this anymore." "Sit down," Audra commanded. "No." Cindy's voice was stronger now. "You want to know what I think? I think Horace saw us clearly, saw what we really are, and he chose her because she was better than us." "You're being ridiculous." "Am I?" Cindy's eyes filled with tears. "We destroyed that girl, kicked her out when she was mourning her husband, our brother, and now we're sitting here planning—" She couldn't finish. "I won't be part of this." She walked to the door, then paused. "If anything happens to her, I'll tell the police everything. I'll tell them about the investigator, about the threats, about all of it." "You wouldn't dare," Audra said. "Try me." After Cindy left, slamming the door behind her, Audra turned to Georgina. "She's weak. She's smart." Georgina stared into her scotch. "She knows we're losing, knows this game was rigged from the start. So what do you suggest? We just accept it? Let that woman take everything?" Georgina was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful, measured. "We can't touch her directly, not with Cindy watching, not with Fuller protecting her, but accidents happen, especially to people living in cheap motels in bad neighborhoods." Georgina met her sister's eyes. "The trick is making sure no one can prove we were involved." Audra's lips curved into a slow smile. "I knew you'd see reason." "I'm not doing this for you." Georgina's expression was cold. "I'm doing this because I refuse to lose. Not to her, not to anyone." She finished her scotch and stood. "I'll make arrangements, quietly, nothing that can be traced back to us." "How long?" "A week, maybe 2. Georgina headed for the door. "In the meantime, act normal. Be the grieving sisters. Play your role." After Georgina left, Audra sat alone in her father's study, the photographs of Jessie spread across the desk. She picked up one Jessie's wedding photo, the one she'd rescued from the trash after ordering everything else burned. In it, Horace looked happier than Audra had ever seen him. His hand rested on Jessie's belly, his smile genuine and unguarded. Audra struck a match, watching the flame dance in the darkness. "If she comes back," she whispered, touching the flame to the corner of the photograph, "she won't live long enough to enjoy it." The picture caught fire, curling in on itself. Horace's face blackened and disappeared. Then Jessie's. Audra watched until there was nothing left but ash. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt drenched. The motel's neon sign flickered outside Jessie's window, buzzing red against the wet pavement like an open wound that refused to close. Inside, the silence was thick enough to hum. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope Jonathan had given her, the words, "Trust me," looping in her head until they lost all meaning. She hadn't slept, couldn't. Every creak in the hallway made her jolt. Every passing car light through the curtains felt like headlights stopping for her. At 9:14 p.m., there was a knock. 3 deliberate taps, not frantic, not polite, just measured. Jessie froze. The baby kicked once, sharp and startled, as if sensing her fear. Another knock. "Mrs. Harrison?" The voice was calm, familiar. "It's Jonathan, we need to talk." Jessie's first instinct was to stay silent. She reached for her phone, half expecting another warning text, but there was nothing. "Please," Jonathan said, softer this time. "You're safe. I promise." Promises. She'd heard enough of those to fill a graveyard. Still, she stood. Slowly, she unlatched the chain, cracked the door, and peeked through. Jonathan stood there in a gray coat, collar turned up against the chill, an umbrella dripping onto the concrete. His expression was serious but not unkind. Jessie opened the door just enough to let him in. "How did you find me?" "I'm your attorney," he said simply, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "It's my job to know where you are." She crossed her arms over her belly, wary. "You said not to talk to anyone, not to open the door unless they said the password." "I know." Jonathan set his briefcase on the small table near the window. That rule was for everyone else. Jessie didn't move from where she stood. The motel room suddenly felt smaller with him in it, too warm, too close. "What's going on?" she asked finally. "Why are you here?" Jonathan glanced around, making sure the curtains were drawn before he spoke. Because things are moving faster than I anticipated, the Harmon sisters have started pushing for control of the estate. Jesse's pulse quickened. They're trying to take the money? They can't, he said. Not legally. Your husband's will is airtight, but they've found out the assets are frozen until after your child is born. That means they have motive and desperation. Jessie sank onto the bed, the springs creaking beneath her. I don't understand any of this. Horace never even told me he was... She broke off, unable to finish. Jonathan studied her. How much did you know about your husband's finances, Mrs. Harrison? She gave a small, humorless laugh. You mean besides the credit card I wasn't allowed to touch and the accounts he said were complicated? Not much. He told me everything was handled. Jonathan opened his briefcase, removing a leather folder. Then it's time you understood what handled really meant. He handed her a document, a notarized letter bearing Horace's elegant signature. Jessie's eyes moved over the words, struggling to make sense of them. This says, I'm the sole beneficiary of all his holdings? Correct. Every controlling share of Harrison Global Investments, every offshore account, every property. Horace left it all to you. Her hands trembled as she held the paper. That can't be right. There must be some mistake. There's no mistake. Jonathan sat across from her, his tone steady. You are, legally and irrevocably, the owner of your late husband's empire. But the will's execution is conditional. It can't be unsealed until after your child's birth. Jessie stared at him. Conditional? Why? Jonathan hesitated. Because Horace wanted to ensure you and the baby would survive long enough to claim it. A chill ran through her. Survive? He leaned forward, his voice low. Your husband knew his sisters better than anyone. He knew what greed can do to people who think they've been cheated. He anticipated they'd come for you the moment he died. Jessie's throat tightened. He thought they'd hurt me? I think he knew they'd try. She shook her head, tears welling. Why didn't he tell me? Why keep everything a secret? The will, the money, all of it? Jonathan exhaled slowly. Because he was protecting you. The less you knew, the safer you were. If something happened to him and he feared it might, you wouldn't be a target until the truth had to come out. Jessie pressed her hand against her belly as if to shield the baby from invisible claws. You keep saying if something happened. What exactly do you think happened to him, Jonathan? He looked away, eyes darkening. The police report says accident, but the evidence, he paused. Let's just say it's not as clean as it should be. You think someone tampered with his car? I think, Jonathan said carefully, that people with access to power and motive can make accidents look very convincing. Jessie covered her mouth, a sob breaking through her composure. Oh my God! Jonathan reached for a tissue box on the nightstand, placing it gently beside her. Mrs. Harrison, Jessie, listen to me. Your husband's death may not have been random. That's why we need to be cautious. The Harmon sisters will stop at nothing to regain control of the company. They're already trying to find you. They already have, Jessie whispered. Someone's been calling the motel, offering money for my room number. Jonathan's expression hardened. Then we're running out of time. He stood, pacing once before turning back to her. I've arranged for you to see a doctor, quietly. A clinic on the south side that doesn't ask many questions. You'll go under an alias, Sarah Monroe. I'll cover the bills in cash. Jessie looked up at him, startled. You've planned all this? I've had to. He hesitated, softening his tone. Horace trusted me to protect you. I'm doing what he couldn't. She wanted to believe him, needed to, but trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered too many times. Do you think they'll try again? She asked quietly. Like the car? Jonathan didn't answer right away. Then, if they believe you're dead, their attention will shift. That's why you need to disappear for a while. Jessie frowned. Disappear? New name, new address, new routine. He met her eyes. Until the baby comes, no one can know where you are, not even the clinic staff. Use cash for everything. Don't answer calls from unknown numbers. And after the baby? He closed his briefcase. After the baby, you won't have to hide anymore. There was a heaviness in his tone that made her uneasy. Because the will be read? "Because you'll have leverage," he said, "and power changes everything." The next morning, Jessie stood outside the clinic Jonathan had arranged. The sign above the door read Street Mary's Free Health Center, the paint chipped and faded. The smell of disinfectant hit her as soon as she stepped inside, a mixture of bleach and resignation. The nurse at the front desk barely looked up. "Name?" "Sarah Monroe." Jessie forced her voice steady. "First visit?" "Yes." "Take a seat. Doctor will call you soon." She sat among tired mothers, coughing children, and old men who looked like they'd stopped believing in miracles decades ago. For the first time in weeks, Jessie felt invisible, ordinary, and that anonymity felt like a kind of safety. When her name was called her false one, she followed a young doctor into a small examination room. He was kind, efficient, the sort who spoke softly out of habit. "How far along?" 30 weeks, she said. He nodded, jotting it down. "Everything seems normal. Blood pressure's good, baby's heartbeat strong." Jessie exhaled, a sound somewhere between relief and heartbreak. "Thank God." The doctor smiled faintly. "You're doing fine, Miss Monroe. Just keep resting. Avoid stress if you can. Avoid stress." If only it were that simple. Outside, the afternoon had turned gray again, the sky swollen with another storm. Jessie clutched her coat around her belly and started toward the bus stop. The sidewalk was slick, puddles reflecting the sagging power lines overhead. A gust of wind sent her hair across her face, and when she brushed it aside, she saw him, a man leaning against a lamppost across the street. He wasn't looking at her directly, but the tilt of his head, the stillness of his stance, it wasn't casual. She slowed her steps. The man took a drag from his cigarette, exhaled smoke, and flicked the butt into the gutter. When the next bus pulled up, she climbed on quickly, glancing through the window as it pulled away. He was still there, watching. Her hands tightened around the seat in front of her. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just a man waiting for someone. But deep down, Jessie knew better. Some storms, she thought, don't end when the rain stops. They just learn how to walk on two legs. The mansion was too quiet. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet, it was the kind that breathed, the kind that waited. Georgina Harmon sat alone in the study, the same room where Horace had once spent his evenings reviewing market reports and sipping whiskey. Now, every time she came in here, the clock on the wall seemed louder, the shadows deeper, and the scent of cigar smoke, his cigar smoke, stronger. It had been 2 weeks since Arthur Pembroke's visit, 2 weeks since the sisters had decided to act, and yet nothing had happened. No news, no accident, no closure. But something had arrived instead. A plain envelope, no return address, just their house's name, Harrison Estates, scrawled across the front in bold black ink. Inside were photographs. Georgina spread them out on the desk one by one, her manicured fingers trembling. Jessie. At a grocery store. At a bus stop. At a clinic door, her belly round beneath a cheap coat. The dates were recent, just days old. Audra stormed into the study without knocking, her heels clicking like gunfire. "You called?" Georgina didn't look up. "Someone's playing games with us." Audra frowned. "What is that?" "Proof." Georgina turned one photo around so Audra could see. "She's alive." Audra snatched the photo, her expression twisting. "Impossible. She stopped herself, lowering her voice. "We arranged for—" "I know what we arranged." Georgina's tone was ice. But it didn't work. "She must have left town." "She's in Chicago," Georgina said, pointing to a street sign barely visible in one shot. "Downtown, near the law offices." Audra stared at it in disbelief. "That bitch is haunting us." "No." Georgina met her sister's eyes. "Someone's haunting us. Someone who wants us to know she's alive." Before Audra could respond, the door creaked open again. Cindy stood there, pale, clutching her robe around her shoulders. "What's going on?" she asked softly. "Why are you two yelling?" Audra rolled her eyes. "Go back to bed, Cindy." Cindy took a few hesitant steps into the room. "I couldn't sleep. I heard voices." Georgina hesitated, then handed her a photo. "Take a look." Cindy stared at it for a long time before whispering, "No, this isn't real." It's real." Georgina's voice was flat. "The dates are from this week." Cindy's hand flew to her mouth. "She's supposed to be gone. Audra, you said—" "I said we took care of it," Audra snapped. "That's what the man told me." "Then explain that." Georgina's voice sharpened. "Explain how she's walking around, shopping for groceries, smiling like she didn't just crawl out of the grave." Cindy dropped the photo like it burned her. "It's Horace." Audra blinked. "What?" "It's him." Cindy's voice trembled. "He's punishing us. You said it yourself. Georgina, ghosts don't stay quiet when there's unfinished business." Audra groaned. "Oh, for God's sake." "I'm serious." Cindy backed toward the door. "He loved her. He died, and we threw her out into a storm while she was carrying his baby. What if he's watching us?" Audra took a step forward, eyes blazing. "Don't be ridiculous." Cindy shook her head, whispering, "No, you don't get it. The lights flicker every night at exactly 10:12 the same time the crash happened. And yesterday when I walked into the nursery—" "What nursery?" Georgina cut in sharply. "The one in the West Wing. The one we closed after he died." Cindy's voice broke. "The mobile was spinning, Georgina. The one Jessie bought. It was spinning, but the windows were shut." Audra slammed her hand against the desk. "Enough!" Cindy flinched. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "You can't bully away ghosts, Audra, not his." She fled the room, leaving her sisters in the heavy silence that followed. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Georgina said quietly, "You need to control her." Audra exhaled through her nose, furious. "She's cracking. She's talking about ghosts, Audra. If she says the wrong thing to the wrong person, she won't." "How can you be so sure?" Audra turned her back. "Because she's weak. Fear keeps her loyal." But even as she said it, something flickered across her face, something uncertain. Because Georgina wasn't the only one hearing things at night. Sometimes, just before dawn, Audra swore she could hear footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate, familiar. And once, when she'd passed Horace's study, she could have sworn she smelled his cologne. Across the city, Jessie woke to the sound of glass breaking. Her heart leapt into her throat. She sat up, disoriented, staring into the darkness of the motel room. For a moment, all she could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the faint rumble of distant traffic. Then another sound, a shuffle, the creak of the door. Jessie's hand went instinctively to the nightstand where she'd left Horace's folder. Gone. She froze. Her pulse roared in her ears as she scanned the shadows. The window was cracked open, the curtains swaying slightly. Rain whispered against the glass. Someone had been here. Maybe they still were. "Hello?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "Is someone there?" Nothing. She slid off the bed slowly, her bare feet silent on the carpet. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She reached the window and peeked outside. Only the parking lot, empty except for a flickering streetlight and a stray cat darting under a car. Her phone was still on the nightstand. She grabbed it and texted Jonathan. "Someone broke into my room. Folder's gone. What do I do?" The reply came within minutes. "Leave immediately. Take nothing but essentials. Room compromised. Go to the diner across the street. Booth 6. Wait for me." Jessie didn't think. She just moved. She threw on jeans and a sweater, shoved her phone in her pocket, and ran out into the rain. Her heart pounded as she crossed the street, headlights flashing over her like lightning. The diner's neon sign buzzed weakly. Open 24 hours. Inside, it smelled of coffee and grease. A handful of truckers sat at the counter, half asleep over their plates. Jessie slid into booth 6, her hands shaking. She waited. 5 minutes, 10, 20. Then the bell above the door jingled. Jonathan Fuller stepped in, rain glistening on his coat. He spotted her immediately and walked over, his expression grim. "You did the right thing," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. "Someone took the folder," Jessie whispered. "All of Horace's papers. It's gone." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Were you hurt?" "No, but the door was unlocked." "I know I locked it." "Then they had a key," he said quietly. "Or a copy." Jessie's stomach turned. "Who would—" "Someone who knows you're alive. Someone who wants what Horace left behind." She stared at him. realization dawning. The sisters. Most likely Georgina. She's the strategist. Jessie buried her face in her hands. Why won't they just leave me alone? Because, Jonathan said, leaning forward, you're the key to everything they want. Jessie looked up. What do you mean? Jonathan hesitated, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thin envelope. He slid it across the table. Horace left this for you. I was supposed to wait until the child was born, but given what's happening, you need to see part of it. Jessie opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, Horace's handwriting unmistakable. Jessie, if you're reading this, it means the storm has come. Trust Fuller, don't trust anyone else, and remember, if I die, it wasn't fate. H. Her breath caught. If I die, it wasn't fate. She looked up at Jonathan. He knew he was in danger. Jonathan's expression didn't change, but his eyes said everything. Yes, he suspected someone close to him wanted him gone. His sisters, maybe. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, but proving it will be impossible without the full contents of his will. Then tell me. Jessie's voice broke. Tell me what's in it. I can't. Not yet. The terms are sealed until after your child is born. If I disclose anything prematurely, the court could void the entire estate transfer. Jessie gripped the edge of the table. You mean they could take everything? Everything, he confirmed. That's why you need to stay alive, Jessie. For you, for the baby, for what Horace built. Outside, thunder rolled across the city again, distant but steady. Jessie looked out the window and saw her reflection pale, haunted, but alive. She touched her stomach, whispering to the child within, Your father knew. Jonathan watched her quietly. Then he said, He didn't just leave you money, he left you truth, and that truth is what scares them most. The coffee had gone cold between them, untouched. Outside the diner window, dawn was smudging the edge of the sky, gray, colorless, uncertain. Jonathan broke the silence first. You need a new place to stay. Jessie nodded slowly. Somewhere they can't find me. He checked his watch, already planning. I'll have a friend at the firm set up a short-term rental under a false name. It'll be cash only, no traceable records. Jessie swallowed, her throat raw. And until then? There's a clinic 2 blocks from here, Street Mary's Outreach. Use a different name when you check in. Tell them you're a walk-in with no insurance. What name? He thought for a moment. Go with your mother's maiden name, Bennett. First name Lisa. Jessie repeated it quietly, Lisa Bennett. The name felt strange in her mouth, like she was trying on someone else's skin. Jonathan's eyes softened, just slightly. I'll handle the rest. Get some food, get checked out, don't answer unknown numbers, and if anyone asks about me, anyone you've never heard the name Jonathan Fuller. Jessie almost smiled. You talk like we're in a spy movie. We're in something worse, he said, rising from the booth. A family war. He placed a few bills under his untouched cup of coffee and gave her one last look, part lawyer, part guardian. Stay invisible, Mrs. Harrison. Until the baby comes, secrecy is survival. Then he was gone. Jessie followed his advice. By noon, she was sitting in the waiting area of Street Mary's Outreach, wearing borrowed clothes from the motel's donation bin, a faded sweatshirt and oversized coat that hid her pregnancy well enough. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. A tired nurse behind the counter asked her name without looking up. Lisa Bennett, Jessie said. The nurse jotted it down. First time here? Yes. Any complications? Just stress. The nurse finally looked up then, eyes softening as she took in Jessie's pallor. You're safe here, honey. We'll take care of you. The words nearly undid her. Safe. She couldn't remember the last time anyone had said that to her and meant it. They took her blood pressure, her weight, her heartbeat, her baby's heartbeat. That last one, the soft gallop of life inside her, was the only sound that seemed to make the world slow down again. The doctor smiled. Strong heartbeat, perfectly healthy for 7 months. Jessie exhaled, tears prickling her eyes. Thank you. Any support at home? The doctor asked gently. Jessie hesitated. Some. Not much. Well, stress isn't your friend. Try to rest. When the appointment ended, Jessie stepped back into the cool Chicago air. clutching the pamphlets the clinic had given her. Prenatal nutrition, labor preparation, signs of emotional trauma. She almost laughed at that last one, as if any pamphlet could tell her how to survive what she'd been through. She stopped by a street vendor for a cup of soup, feeling the baby shift beneath her coat as she ate. For a fleeting second, she imagined a future where she could live without fear. A small apartment. Warm mornings. Laughter. Then she noticed him. Across the street, a man leaning against a parked car, not looking directly at her, not yet, but watching in that way people do when they're pretending not to. Dark coat, gloves, no umbrella, even though the drizzle had started again. Jesse froze. He shifted his weight, pretending to check his phone. When she began walking, he started too casual, unhurried, always keeping one street between them. Her pulse jumped. Jonathan's words echoed in her head. Don't trust anyone, stay invisible. She turned down an alley, then another. Her shoes slipped on wet pavement. The man followed. Jessie ducked into a laundromat, heart racing. The hum of dryers and smell of detergent filled the air. She crouched behind a row of machines and peered through the glass door. The man stopped outside, scanning. Then he lifted his phone, spoke quietly into it, and walked away. Her hands trembled as she sank onto the floor, breathing hard. They'd found her. That night, Jessie called Jonathan from a payphone near the motel. "They're watching me," she said, her voice barely holding steady. "A man followed me from the clinic." Jonathan didn't sound surprised. "Describe him." "Tall, brown coat, looked military." He knew how to blend in. "Did he make contact?" "No, but he was talking to someone." "Georgina," Jonathan muttered. "It has to be. She's using her investigator again." "What do I do?" "I'll handle it. Stay inside tonight. Lock your door and leave the light off. I'll send someone to change the motel's locks by morning." Jessie hesitated. "Jonathan, why is this happening?" He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, almost regretful. "Because Horace wasn't supposed to die." She swallowed. "You mean—" He cut her off gently. "Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow." But Jessie couldn't sleep. The rain returned, heavier this time. Each thunderclap sounded closer, echoing off the motel's thin walls. She sat on the bed with Horace's letter in her hands, tracing the ink with her fingers. "If I die, it wasn't fate." The phrase repeated in her head until it didn't sound like words anymore, just warning. She thought about that last day before the crash. Horace had kissed her forehead before leaving for the city, saying he needed to finalize some papers. He'd been tense more than usual. When she'd asked what was wrong, he'd brushed it off. "I'll tell you everything when I get back," he'd said. But he never came back. Now, lying awake, Jessie wondered if that conversation had been his goodbye. She pressed a hand to her belly. "I'll protect you," she whispered, "no matter what it takes." The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the motel again, this time unannounced. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes shadowed by lack of sleep. "You didn't tell me he tried to get inside," he said. Jessie blinked. "How did you?" "Security footage. My contacts pulled it from the gas station next door. The man used a lockpick on your door before you woke up." Jessie's stomach turned. "Oh my God." "He didn't find what he was looking for," Jonathan said. "I retrieved what was left behind." He placed a sealed envelope on the table. Jessie recognized Horace's handwriting immediately. "I thought they took everything," she said. "They missed this." She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single slip of paper, just 3 sentences. "If they come for you, go to Fuller, only Fuller, trust no one else. They think money is power, they're wrong." Jessie looked up, her voice barely a whisper. He knew he was going to die. Jonathan nodded once. Horace suspected one of his sisters wanted him gone. The room seemed to tilt. Jessie gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "Which one?" "I don't know yet," Jonathan said. "But if I had to guess, Georgina, she's always been the strategist." Jessie's breath trembled. "And Audra?" "She's a weapon used by whoever holds the leash." He studied her for a moment, his gaze steady. "You're stronger than you think, Jessie. Horace saw it before anyone else did. That's why he trusted you with everything." She looked down at her swollen belly. Everything feels like too much. Jonathan's voice softened. Then start with this staying alive. He stood, glancing toward the rain streaking down the motel window. Things are going to get worse before they get better. But I promise you the truth is coming. Jesse met his eyes. And when it does, he hesitated at the door, then said, then none of them will be able to hide behind ghosts anymore. When he left, Jesse stayed by the window, watching the parking lot shimmer beneath the storm. Somewhere out there, someone was still watching her, but for the first time, fear wasn't the only thing she felt. There was something else beneath it now. Resolve. She picked up Horace's letter and whispered, "You were right. It wasn't fate." The thunder rolled again low, deliberate, almost like laughter, and Jessie decided she didn't care if it was ghosts or justice. Either way, someone was coming for the Harrisons. The rain had stopped, but the city hadn't dried. Puddles mirrored the skyline in distorted ripples as Jonathan Fuller crossed the plaza toward the courthouse. His overcoat was buttoned, his jaw tight, his briefcase clutched like a weapon. Inside his office earlier that morning, he had looked Jessie Harrison in the eye and said the words that would change the course of her grief. "It's time to fight back." And she had nodded. Not hesitantly this time, but with quiet, deliberate resolve. Brando, Fuller Law Offices 8, 47 Ampere. M. Jessie sat opposite Jonathan in the glass-walled conference room, her palms resting on the cool surface of the table. The Chicago skyline loomed behind her, tall and indifferent. She wasn't wearing the timid expression Jonathan had first seen in that storm. Her hair was tied back, her shoulders squared beneath a borrowed blazer he'd brought from storage. She looked fragile, yes, but also ready. Jonathan slid a folder toward her. "This is the petition to the probate court. Once it's filed, the judge will review the will's confidentiality clause. If we can argue duress or risk to the heir, the court might authorize early disclosure." "In English?" Jessie asked softly. "In English," he said. "It means we can unseal Horace's will before the baby comes if we prove your life is in danger." Jessie's hand stilled. "So we'd be using their threats against them." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Jonathan's face. "Exactly." He passed her a pen. "You'll need to sign the affidavit here. It states that you've been harassed, followed, and targeted since Horace's death." Her signature was slow, but steady. "You think the court will believe me?" "They won't have a choice," Jonathan said. "Not when they see what I've compiled." He opened another folder, photos of the man who'd followed Jessie, still frames from security footage, timestamps, cross-reference to calls placed from Georgina Harmon's number. Jessie's heart clenched. "That's her, isn't it? She sent him." Jonathan nodded once. "And now she'll pay for it." The Harrison mansion later that morning. Audra Harmon had never liked waiting, and yet that's what she'd been doing, pacing the length of her late father's study, with a cigarette burning low between her fingers. The man sitting across from her looked out of place, a stranger among polished oak and crystal decanters. He wore a cheap gray suit and the kind of smirk that didn't belong anywhere near morality. "Miss Harmon," he drawled, "I don't do messy work. You understand that?" Audra flicked ash into the crystal tray. "Discretion is all I care about." "Then you came to the right man." He leaned back, the chair creaking beneath him. "But accidents don't come cheap. You're asking for something permanent. Pregnant woman, high profile. That's a headline waiting to happen if anyone looks too close." Audra's lips thinned. "I'm asking for peace of mind." "Peace of mind," the man repeated with a smirk. "That'll run you 200 grand, half up front, half when it's done." Audra's eyes flicked to the drawer where her checkbook waited. "Cash," she said. The man chuckled. "Now you're speaking my language." Neither noticed the faint click behind the bookshelf, the smallest sound, like glass settling, because Georgina Harmon was recording everything. She had installed the tiny device herself the night before, hidden behind a row of their father's antique books. Now, standing in the hallway with her ear to the wood paneling, she listened to every word. Her pulse raced, but not from fear, from opportunity. Audra thought she was running the family. She thought she could buy her way out of ruin, but Georgina knew better. Power didn't come from money anymore. It came from leverage. and with this recording, she would finally have all of it. When the man left, Georgina waited until Audra stubbed out her cigarette and poured herself a drink before stepping inside. "Enjoying your morning crime spree?" she asked dryly. Audra jumped, startled. "Jesus, Georgina, don't sneak up on me like that. Who was he?" "No one you need to worry about." "Oh, I think I do." Georgina crossed her arms. "You just hired someone to commit murder in our father's house. That makes it my problem." Audra's expression hardened. "You've been listening." "Of course I have." "You had no right." "I have every right," Georgina snapped. "Do you think I'm going to let you drag this family into prison with you?" Audra's laugh was brittle. "You're such a hypocrite. You wanted her gone as much as I did. Wanting something and being stupid enough to order it are two very different things." Georgina poured herself a scotch, unbothered by Audra's glare. "Do you have any idea what happens if this blows up? The police won't come for you first, they'll come for me. I'm the one with the assets, the one whose name is on everything. So what do you suggest?" "I suggest," Georgina said calmly, "that you remember who you're talking to. Because the next time you threaten this family's future, I'll make sure everyone hears that little chat you just had." Audra's face drained of color. "You wouldn't." "I would." Georgina raised her glass in a mock toast. "Welcome to the new balance of power, sister." In the hallway beyond, Cindy stood frozen. She'd gone downstairs to look for her phone charger, at least, that's what she'd told herself. The truth was simpler and sadder. She couldn't sleep, couldn't stop hearing Jesse's name in her dreams, but now she'd heard something far worse. 200 grand. Accident don't come cheap. Her stomach lurched. She backed away quietly, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they'd hear it. By the time she reached the staircase, her hands were shaking. She needed to tell someone. Anyone. But who would believe her? Certainly not the police. The Harrisons had friends in every office, every courtroom in Chicago. Then she remembered the name she'd seen on the letterhead the day Arthur Pembroke came by Brando and Fuller attorneys. Jonathan Fuller. He'd been at Horace's funeral, calm, polite, a little distant but kind. If anyone could stop this before it went too far, it would be him. Cindy grabbed her coat and keys, ignoring the rain that had begun again outside. She didn't care. Her sister might call her weak, but she wasn't going to stand by while blood was spilled. Brando and Fuller offices that afternoon. Jonathan was on the phone when his assistant buzzed in. "There's a woman here to see you, says it's urgent." "Name?" "She wouldn't give one. Says you'll want to hear what she has to say about the Harrisons." Jonathan hesitated, then said, "Send her in." Cindy entered the room like someone expecting to be shot at. Her hair was soaked, her coat clinging to her shoulders, her eyes wide with fear. Jonathan recognized her immediately. "Cindy Harmon." "Please," she whispered, closing the door behind her. "You don't know me, but I know who you are, and if you don't help me, my sisters are going to kill someone." Jonathan motioned to the chair opposite his desk. "Start from the beginning." She did, every word spilling out in a torrent: the fixer, the payment, Georgina's threats, Audra's rage. When she finished, Jonathan sat back, exhaling slowly. "You understand what you've just confessed could destroy your family?" Cindy nodded, tears streaking her face. "They already destroyed themselves. I just don't want them to take her down with them." Jonathan studied her for a long moment. There was sincerity in her eyes, guilt, yes, but also something cleaner, something redeemable. "I can protect Jesse," he said finally, "but you need to disappear for a while. They can't know you came here." "I don't care what happens to me," she said, "just keep her safe." Jonathan rose and extended a hand. "You did the right thing, Miss Harmon. For once, someone in your family finally did." She took his hand, trembling. Do you think Horace would forgive us?" Jonathan's voice softened. "I think forgiveness isn't what you need to worry about right now." That night, a storm returned to the city, sudden, violent, and sharp. Jessie lay in her motel bed, half asleep, when the smell hit her. Smoke. At first, she thought it was from outside, maybe someone burning trash in the alley, but then the fire alarm shrieked, and she saw the orange light flicker under the door. She was on her feet before she even realized she'd moved. "Help!" she shouted, pounding on the wall. "Fire!" The smoke thickened quickly, choking her. She grabbed her bag, the one with the baby's sonogram, and staggered toward the window. Outside, flames licked the roof, glass shattered, and someone screamed in the next room. Jessie threw the window open, coughing violently. Rain poured in, but it couldn't smother the blaze. She climbed onto the sill, clutching the frame as the floorboards behind her groaned. Then a voice, distant but unmistakable. "Jessie, jump!" Jonathan. He was below, coat-soaked, arms outstretched. She hesitated for a single heartbeat, then leapt. Jessie hit the ground hard. The air punched out of her lungs. The world blurred, rain, smoke, Jonathan's voice calling her name. Then his hands were on her shoulders, pulling her up, guiding her away from the burning building. "Come on," he said, his tone controlled but urgent. "We need to move now." The motel's roof was already collapsing, sparks raining down like burning snow. Sirens wailed in the distance, a sharp cry against the storm. Jonathan half carried her toward the parking lot, where his black sedan idled, engine running. Jessie's body trembled uncontrollably. "My bag," she rasped, coughing smoke. I've got it." He lifted the bag from his shoulder and pushed her gently into the passenger seat. "Breathe through your sleeve. Slow, you're okay." She turned toward the window, watching the motel dissolve into flames. The rain couldn't put it out. Everything she'd owned, the notes, the clothes, the locket Horace had given her, gone. Jonathan's jaw was set like stone as he drove, knuckles white against the wheel. When they reached the highway, Jessie finally spoke. "That wasn't an accident." He didn't look at her. "No, it wasn't." 1 hour later, safe house apartment, South Chicago. Jonathan led her into a small apartment above a shuttered antiques shop. It was sparse, single couch, small kitchenette, heavy curtains drawn tight. Jessie's knees nearly buckled when she stepped inside. Exhaustion had hollowed her out, but adrenaline kept her upright. Jonathan poured water into a glass and handed it to her. "You're lucky," he said quietly. "If I'd been 10 minutes later—" "Why were you there?" "I've had men watching the motel," he admitted. Discreetly. "After Cindy came to my office, I wasn't taking chances." Jessie froze mid-sip. "Cindy? His sister?" He nodded. "She came forward. She's the one who warned me." "She? What?" Jessie sank onto the couch, her voice trembling between disbelief and relief. "I thought she hated me." "Maybe she did," Jonathan said, "but guilt changes people. She told me enough to know you were in danger." Jessie pressed a hand to her belly. "So Audra really did it. She tried to have me killed." Jonathan hesitated, then said, "Yes, she hired a fixer. We have a name, a recording, everything." Jessie's head spun. The weight of it settled over her like smoke, all the cruelty, the humiliation, the lies. And now, fire. "Then we go to the police," she said. "We show them everything." Jonathan shook his head. "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because we can't prove it was her. The fire's going to be ruled accidental unless we have hard evidence. If we go to the police now, it tips her off that we're onto her. She'll vanish, take Georgina with her, and we'll lose any chance of exposing them." Jessie's eyes filled with tears of frustration. "So what do? "We fight the way Horace wanted us to," he said, "with strategy, with the law." Jonathan opened his briefcase and pulled out 2 folders. The first contained Horace's trust structure shell companies, asset transfers, coded accounts hidden across 3 continents. The second held a sealed envelope. Horace's handwriting marked it clearly, "To be opened upon necessity." "I shouldn't be showing you this," Jonathan said, "but after tonight, the rules don't matter anymore." Jessie reached out, her fingers trembling as she traced Horace's name. Jonathan broke the seal and unfolded a letter written in Horace's distinctive, precise hand. "My dearest Jessie, if you're reading this, it means I failed to protect you while I was alive. Everything I built, every dollar, every company was for you and our child. But there are people who would destroy you to take it back. You must trust Jonathan. He's the only one who knows the truth about what happened and what's coming. The crash was not an accident. If anything happens to me, look to my family first. I made mistakes, Jessie. I ignored the warnings. Don't make the same one. Live, survive, for our child. And when the time comes, make them answer for what they've done." Horace C. Harrison. Jessie covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. The words felt like a ghost reaching through the page, his voice, his handwriting, his certainty. He knew, she whispered. He knew they were going to kill him. Jonathan folded the letter back into its envelope. And he left proof. What kind of proof? There's a digital record of the car's maintenance logs, Jonathan said. Horace installed a dash camera in secret, tied to a secure cloud server. The feed was wiped the night he died, but not before he sent me a copy. Jessie's breath caught. And it shows? Nothing definitive yet. But there's a timestamp, and the car's onboard diagnostics recorded a remote override. That means someone tampered with his vehicle remotely. Jessie shivered. Georgina. Jonathan nodded grimly. She had access to the company's security infrastructure. The override signal came from a network registered to Harrison Global. The room fell silent. The truth hung between them, heavy and irrevocable. Jessie looked out the window toward the shadowed street below. They won't stop, will they? No, Jonathan said. Not until they're certain you're dead. 2 days later, temporary clinic, West Side. Jessie sat in the waiting room, wearing a gray hoodie and using the alias Jessica Moore. Jonathan had arranged the appointment through a contact in his firm's pro bono network, a doctor who owed him a favor. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Children cried somewhere down the hall. A nurse passed by with a clipboard and called, "Miss Moore?" Jessie rose, her hands cradling her stomach as she followed the nurse into a small exam room. The doctor smiled warmly. "7th month, yes?" Jessie nodded. "Almost 8th. Good. We'll check the heartbeat and run a few labs. Make sure both of you are holding steady." The rhythmic thump of the fetal heartbeat filled the room a few minutes later, soft, steady, alive. Jessie felt her eyes sting. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. When the appointment ended, the doctor pressed a small card into her hand. "If you need anything, vitamins, a safe place to deliver, call me directly. No charge." Jessie smiled faintly. "Thank you." Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady. She pulled her hood up and stepped into the gray afternoon, her steps cautious but sure. She had Horace's letter now, proof of his foresight, his fear. The pieces were coming together. But someone else was putting the pieces together too. Across the street, parked in an unmarked sedan, a man lifted a camera and focused the lens. The rain distorted the shot, but the image was clear enough. Jessie Harrison, very much alive. He lowered the camera and dialed his phone. "She's moving again," he said. "Went to a clinic, West Side." A woman's voice answered. Smooth, controlled. "Keep her in sight," Georgina said. "Don't approach yet. I want to know where she sleeps, who she speaks to, every move she makes." "Yes, ma'am." The call ended. The man turned the key in the ignition and watched Jessie disappear around the corner. As she vanished from view, he smiled faintly. "Got you." Brando and Fuller offices that evening. Jonathan stared at his computer monitor, replaying the dashcam footage frame by frame. The timestamp blinked. 03:42, 16 amperes. The moment Horace's car had veered off the bridge. The data packet he'd decrypted revealed fragments, partial GPS pings, residual signals, fragments of audio. And then a voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakably Horace's. "If anything happens to me, start with Georgina. She'll make it look like an accident." Jonathan froze. The room seemed to tilt. He hit pause and replayed it again. Same words, same tone. The chain of evidence was complete. But the moment he reached for his phone, a new message flashed across the screen. "Unknown number. You're getting too close, Fuller." Then another. "A car crash is easy, a house fire's easier. Want to test a third option?" Jonathan's pulse spiked. He slammed the laptop shut, grabbed his coat, and ran for the door. Jessie. She was still in danger. West Side, 8:22 p.m. Jessie walked home from the clinic, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the umbrella Jonathan had left her. The city hummed around her, traffic, voices, thunder muttering in the distance. When she turned onto the narrow side street toward her new safe house, she heard its footsteps behind her. Slow, measured. She quickened her pace. The footsteps matched. Jessie turned sharply at the next corner, but there was no one there, just a flickering street lamp and the rain. She exhaled shakily, then looked up toward the apartment's second-story window. The light Jonathan had left on glowed faintly behind the curtains. Safe. She was safe. Or so she thought. From across the street, behind the cover of a parked car, a camera clicked. Flash off. Lens steady. Georgina's private investigator lowered it again, watching her disappear inside. He smiled to himself, dialing a number as thunder rolled overhead. "She's home," he said, and in the silence that followed, Georgina's voice came through, calm and merciless. "Good. Now we know where to find her." Rain hammered the streets of downtown Chicago, streaking down the black glass windows of Brando and Fuller attorneys. The city seemed to hold its breath, the skyline veiled in mist and thunder. Inside the firm's top-floor boardroom, the air was thick with tension and the faint scent of espresso and polished oak. Jonathan Fuller stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his expression unreadable. Beside him, a stack of sealed folders rested like weapons waiting to be drawn. Across from him sat the Harmon sisters Audra, Georgina, and Cindy, each embodying a different shade of anxiety. Audra was restless, tapping a manicured nail against the crystal glass of water she hadn't touched. Her posture was rigid, her jaw locked, every muscle coiled for attack. Georgina was quieter but colder, her hair pulled into a perfect bun, eyes sharp behind designer glasses. She wasn't just angry, she was calculating. Cindy sat between them, smaller, somehow fragile in a pale blouse, her hands trembling as she clasped a crumpled tissue. She hadn't stopped crying since they'd arrived. Jonathan didn't speak immediately. He let silence stretch, the storm outside echoing the storm inside the room. Then he finally looked up. "Thank you for coming," he said evenly. "I know it's been a difficult few months since Mr. Harrison's passing, but the time has come to finalize the matter of his estate." Audra scoffed softly. "You mean the time has come to tell us how much of our brother's money that waitress gets to keep?" Jonathan's gaze didn't flicker. "Mrs. Harrison," he corrected, deliberately emphasizing the title. "And yes, today we clarify everything." Georgina folded her arms. "I still don't see why we needed to come in person. Couldn't you have sent us the figures by email?" "No," Jonathan said, "because some things deserve to be spoken aloud, especially when truth and accountability are involved." That caught Georgina's attention. Her eyes narrowed. "Accountability?" Jonathan leaned forward slightly. "Yes. You see, over the past few weeks, new evidence has come to light regarding your brother's death, his will, and certain actions taken by members of this family after his passing." Audra's expression hardened. "You're not seriously insinuating—" "I'm not insinuating anything," Jonathan said, cutting her off calmly. "I'm presenting facts. Facts your brother made sure I would uncover if ever necessary." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room for a heartbeat. Jonathan glanced toward the door, his voice lowering. "But before we begin, we're waiting on one more person." Audra's lips curved into a mocking smile. "Let me guess, the widow?" Jonathan didn't answer. A second later, the door opened. The room fell silent. Jessie stepped inside. She wore black, not mourning black, but power black. A fitted coat, her hair pulled back, her presence composed yet electric. Rain glistened on her shoulders like a crown of defiance. Audra's chair scraped violently as she stood. "What the hell is she doing here?" "She has every right to be here," Jonathan said, moving to pull out a chair for Jessie. "This meeting concerns her directly." "She's not part of this family anymore," Audra snapped. "She forfeited that the night you threw her out in a thunderstorm?" Jonathan's voice was mild, but the words landed like steel. "Yes, I'm aware of that night. In fact, I've reviewed the security footage. Do you want me to play it?" Audra froze. Georgina's composure faltered slightly. Cindy turned away, tears welling up again. Jessie remained silent, her eyes locked on the sisters, no longer pleading, no longer afraid, only steady. Jonathan sat beside her and placed a thick, sealed folder on the table. "Shall we begin?" He broke the seal with deliberate precision and drew out a crisp document stamped with the Harrison Global insignia. "This," he began, "is the last will and testament of Horace C. Harrison, executed 4 months before his death. It was drafted under my supervision and verified by 2 independent witnesses." Audra rolled her eyes. "Get on with it." Jonathan continued as though she hadn't spoken. "As executor, it's my duty to distribute Mr. Harrison's assets according to his explicit instructions. The estate includes Harrison Global Investments, the Harrison estate, and all personal accounts and holdings." He paused. "And according to this document, all of it, every share, every asset, every holding, passes entirely to his legal spouse, Jessie Elaine Harrison." Silence. For a full 5 seconds, no one moved. Then Audra's glass shattered against the far wall. "You lying bastard!" she screamed, slamming her palms on the table. "That's impossible! He would never hide! He couldn't have distured." Jonathan didn't flinch. He did. His signature, notarized and authenticated, is right here. Cindy began to sob softly, the sound small and broken. Georgina said nothing. Her face had gone pale, drained of color. "This is a setup," Audra spat. "She manipulated him, drugged him, tricked him into—" Jonathan's voice cut through hers, sharp and final. "Mr. Harrison was of sound mind when he signed this document. Psychological evaluations, cognitive tests, legal witnesses all confirm it. Any accusation of manipulation would collapse instantly in court." Audra's eyes blazed with hatred. "You're her puppet." "I'm her lawyer," Jonathan corrected coolly. "And your brother's." Georgina finally spoke, her voice low. "You said new evidence?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes, your brother anticipated that you might question his decision, so he left proof of your motives." He opened another folder and spread several photographs across the table. Each photo bore timestamps, surveillance stills, signed affidavits, and email exchanges. Audra leaned forward, her bravado slipping as she recognized the images. The investigator Georgina had hired, the meetings in the shadows, the payments funneled through shell companies. Jonathan's voice stayed calm but lethal. "My firm uncovered a series of transactions made from Georgina's personal account to a private investigator, one who's been surveilling Mrs. Harrison since the funeral. There's also a recording a conversation between you, Audra, and that same investigator, discussing how to make sure she doesn't live long enough to inherit." Cindy gasped. "Oh my God!" Georgina's face drained to gray. "You don't have—" Jonathan reached for a tablet and pressed play. Audra's voice filled the room. "She's alone, vulnerable. Pregnant women have complications all the time." Cindy covered her mouth, trembling. "You did say that." Audra lunged across the table, slamming her hand on the device to silence it. "You can't use that in court. That's entrapment." "It's evidence," Jonathan said evenly. "And admissible. The recording was provided by your sister." Audra's head snapped towards Cindy, eyes wide with fury. "You?" Cindy's lip quivered, but she didn't look away. "I warned him, Audra, you were going too far. You betrayed me." "I tried to save her." Cindy's voice cracked, raw with grief. "You wanted to kill a pregnant woman." The argument dissolved into chaos, shouting, accusations, chairs scraping against the marble floor. Through it all, Jessie sat silently, her hands clasped in front of her, her expression calm. When Jonathan finally raised his hand, the room went quiet. He turned to Jessie. "Mrs. Harrison, your husband's final directive requires your acknowledgement before we can proceed with the estate transfer." Jessie rose slowly. The sound of the rain outside filled the silence. She walked to the head of the table, the same position where Audra had stood in her father's study months ago, the same seat from which she'd ordered Jessie to kneel in the rain. Now the roles had reversed. Jessie's gaze moved over each sister, lingering on Audra last. "You threw me into the storm," she said softly. "You made me kneel in the dirt, pregnant and grieving. You called me a gold digger, a parasite, a mistake." Audra opened her mouth, but Jessie didn't let her speak. "I begged you to let me stay. Just one night, you slammed the door in my face." She paused, her voice tightening, but her eyes never wavered. "That night, I thought the rain was washing me away, but it wasn't. It was shaping me." Jonathan watched her, silent but proud. Jesse's voice grew stronger. You thought you were breaking me, but you were building something else, something stronger. I learned to build empires from storms. A crack of thunder punctuated her words. The sisters said nothing. Georgina stared at the table. Cindy wept silently. Audra's face was red with rage and shame. Jesse looked to Jonathan. Let's finish this. He opened the final document, the deed to Harrison Global and the estate. Sliding it across the table toward her, he said quietly, As executor of Horace C. Harrison's will, I hereby transfer ownership and controlling interest to his widow, Jessie Elaine Harrison. Jessie took the pen. For a moment, she hesitated not out of fear, but reverence. She thought of Horace's hand guiding hers the first time she'd signed anything under the Harrison name, his warmth, his belief in her. Then she signed. The ink bled into the paper, final and permanent. Jonathan took the document, sealed it, and met her eyes. It's done. Jessie exhaled, the tension of months releasing all at once. Across the table, Audra sank back into her chair, staring at the document as if it were a death certificate. Georgina whispered something under her breath that sounded like a prayer. Cindy just kept crying, soft and exhausted. Jessie stood still for a moment longer, letting the silence stretch. Then she turned to leave. As she reached the doorway, Jonathan's voice followed her, low and steady. Mrs. Harrison. She paused. You've just inherited an empire. Jessie didn't turn around. No, she said. I've just reclaimed one. The thunder outside rolled like applause. The moment Jessie left the boardroom, the air fractured behind her. Audra's chair screeched against the marble as she surged to her feet. You can't let her walk out with everything, she shouted at Jonathan, voice raw with disbelief. That money belongs to our family, to the Harrisons. Jonathan was still standing at the head of the table, composed, almost indifferent. She is the Harrisons now, he said. The words struck like a slap. Audra lunged toward the table, knocking over the glass pitcher of water. It spilled across the polished surface, soaking the legal papers that documented the end of her power. You smug bastard, she hissed. You've been working for her this whole time. I was working for Horace, Jonathan interrupted sharply. And your brother made his wishes very clear. Every single clause, every transfer, every trust fund was designed to protect her and their child. The rest of you were never part of his plan. Cindy sobbed openly now, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. Stop, Audra, please stop, it's over. But Audra couldn't stop. She was shaking not from fear but fury. Over? She spat. You think I'll let that woman, that waitress, waltz in and take everything we built? I'll contest it. I'll drag her through court until she begs for mercy. You can try, Jonathan said coolly, but you'll lose. And every attempt will only dig you deeper. There's evidence now, emails, recordings, financial movements that prove conspiracy and coercion. Continue this path, and you'll be standing trial instead of sitting here. For the first time, Audra faltered. The thunder outside had softened to a steady rain, tapping against the window like a quiet metronome marking the slow death of their arrogance. Georgina sat motionless, staring out into the city. Her face was calm, eerily calm, but beneath that stillness was the unmistakable glint of a mind breaking apart. She spoke without looking at anyone. I told you this would happen. Audra turned to her, eyes wild. Don't start with me. You burned everything, Georgina said, her tone distant. You made it personal when it should have been strategic. If you'd just kept your temper, if you hadn't humiliated her, maybe we could have negotiated. But you wanted her destroyed. She finally turned her head, meeting Audra's gaze. And now we're the ones ruined. Audra stared, momentarily speechless. Cindy's hands twisted in her lap. She'll forgive us, she whispered, though the words didn't sound like a belief, more like a prayer. She's not like us. Jessie's kind. Georgina laughed quietly, bitterly. Kindness doesn't survive billion-dollar inheritances. Jonathan began collecting the documents, slipping them into his briefcase one by one. Mrs. Harrison will be taking formal possession of the estate within the week, he said. The staff have been notified. I'd advise you to vacate the property before then. You can't throw us out of our own home, Audra snapped. Jonathan met her glare, unflinching. "The house is titled to the Harrison estate, which now belongs to Jesse. The court will enforce eviction if necessary, but if you'd prefer to leave quietly, it will be handled with dignity." Audra laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that didn't belong in the elegant room. "Dignity? You think there's any of that left?" No one answered. When the sisters finally left the boardroom, the sky had darkened to bruised gray. The rain had eased into a fine mist, clinging to their designer coats as they walked out into the world stripped of everything that had once defined them. Audra walked ahead, chin high, her heels striking the pavement like gunfire, but her face betrayed the truth, fury warring with despair. Georgina followed, silent, her phone pressed to her ear though no one was on the other end. She needed the illusion of control, even now. Cindy lingered last, pausing in the lobby's reflection. For the first time, she didn't see the polished socialite or the grieving sister, only a woman who'd been complicit in cruelty. She whispered to the reflection, "I'm sorry, Jesse," before stepping into the rain. Upstairs, Jonathan remained at the conference table, alone with the storm. He loosened his tie and looked out over the city, where lights flickered through fog. It was done. After months of deceit, danger, and secrets, justice had finally been spoken aloud. But peace didn't follow only silence. He turned toward the door just as Jessie reappeared. She hadn't gone far. "I thought you left," he said softly. "I did," Jessie replied, stepping back into the room. "Then I realized there was something I hadn't said." She crossed to the window, her reflection caught in the glass, a figure of strength and grief, of womanhood sharpened by betrayal. "They'll come for me," she said. "Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not this year, but they will." Jonathan nodded. "Yes, they probably will." Jessie turned to him. "And you'll stop them?" He hesitated, then met her gaze. "If I can." Her lips curved faintly. "That's not good enough." Jonathan stepped closer. "Then don't wait for me to stop them. Build something they can't touch." The words hung between them, practical but personal. Jessie studied him for a long moment, as though weighing whether he meant it as advice or as a vow. "Horace trusted you," she said finally, "even when he didn't trust his own blood." Jonathan's eyes softened. "He loved you. That's why he planned every piece of this. You weren't supposed to survive them, you were supposed to replace them." Jessie's throat tightened, but she swallowed the emotion. "Then I'll make sure his faith wasn't misplaced." She gathered her coat, heading for the door. But before she stepped out, she paused. "When the rain hit that night," she said quietly, "I thought it was washing me away. Now I see it was just clearing the dirt so I could see the ground beneath me." Jonathan watched her go. Realizing she no longer moved like someone running from her past, she moved like someone walking toward her destiny. At the Harrison estate, night fell heavy and wet. The mansion that once radiated authority now sat in eerie silence. Most of the lights were off, the grand chandeliers dimmed to flickers. Boxes were stacked in the hallways, expensive lives reduced to cardboard and tape. Audra stood in the study, staring at the family portrait over the fireplace. Horace's face smiled down at her, unchanged, unbothered. "You left me nothing," she whispered. "Not even a chance." Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. The heiress who'd ruled with cruelty now looked small, almost pitiful. Behind her, Georgina entered quietly. "You should start packing. The staff's already halfway gone." Audra didn't turn around. "Do you think she'll really throw us out?" "She doesn't have to. We made this unlivable ourselves." Georgina crossed the room, picking up a half-empty glass from the desk. "The firm transferred every account today. Our cards stopped working an hour ago." Audra exhaled sharply, as if the air itself had betrayed her. "And you're just going to accept that? What choice do we have?" Audra turned then, eyes wild. "You always act like everything's inevitable. You think Horace was some kind of god, that he could see everything before it happened. But he's dead, and I'm still here. Barely." Georgina's tone was icy. "You think you're a queen without a kingdom, but what are you without his money? Without that name?" Audra opened her mouth to reply, but stopped because she didn't know. For the first time in her life, she had no answer. Miles away, Jessie sat in the back seat of a town car, watching raindrops streak across the window. The city lights blurred and shimmered, turning the world into liquid gold. She held a single document in her lap, the signed deed Jonathan had placed before her earlier, her name printed in bold ink. Jessie Elaine Harrison, majority shareholder, Harrison Global Investments. It didn't feel real. Not yet. She traced the edges with her fingertips, then looked out at the skyline, the city that had once ignored her, now hers to command. "Mrs. Harrison," the driver said softly from the front seat. "We're here." Jessie looked up. The car had stopped in front of the mansion. Her mansion. The gates opened slowly, automatically, as if recognizing the rightful heir returning home. Jessie stepped out into the rain without an umbrella. The gravel crunched beneath her boots, the air heavy with petrichor and memory. This was where it had begun, the place she'd been forced to her knees, humiliated, thrown out like a beggar. Now every raindrop felt like applause. Jonathan's words echoed in her mind. "Build something they can't touch." She walked to the front steps, the lights flickering to life as if summoned by her presence. At the door, she paused, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. "Welcome home, Mrs. Harrison," the housekeeper murmured from inside, her voice trembling. Jessie smiled faintly, a quiet, devastating thing. "Thank you," she said. "Let's begin." And with that, she stepped across the threshold, not as the widow they pitied, but as the woman the world would soon learn to fear. The front doors of the Harrison mansion opened with a low groan, the sound of history shifting under new ownership. Jessie stepped across the threshold, her heels silent on the marble floor. The scent of lemon polish and fading roses filled the air, familiar and haunting all at once. She hadn't been inside since the night they threw her out into the rain. That night, the storm had swallowed her screams. Tonight, the silence felt like obedience. Jonathan followed a few paces behind, his coat still damp from the drizzle outside. The staff lined the entry hall, housekeepers, gardeners, security, all standing in quiet formation. Eyes that had once darted away in fear now met hers with reverence. No one spoke. It wasn't ceremony, it was recognition. Jessie moved slowly down the corridor, her fingers brushing the mahogany paneling. The air hummed with the ghosts of laughter and cruelty, of dinners served with hidden contempt. Her reflection followed her across the polished floors, the woman they'd discarded now walking through the ruins of their pride. Jonathan's voice was low. "They've been told to stay until you decide who remains." Jessie didn't answer right away. She paused near the grand staircase, where Horace used to wait for her before every event, bow-tie crooked, smile disarming. The chandelier overhead glittered faintly, 1,000 glass drops frozen mid-tier. "I won't punish the staff," she said finally. "They served who they were told to serve. That ends now." Jonathan nodded. Understood. From deeper in the house came the faint echo of shouting, shrill, furious, "Audra!" Jessie's pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. "I want to see them," she said quietly. Jonathan hesitated, but only for a moment. "They're in the east parlor. The creditors arrived this morning." Jessie smiled, though it wasn't a kind one. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The parlor smelled of old perfume and burned whiskey. Curtains were drawn tight, trapping the room in twilight. Georgina sat slumped in one of the armchairs, an open bottle of scotch balanced between her knees. Her once precise hair hung limp, her lipstick smudged. Across from her, Audra paced like a caged animal, phone pressed to her ear. "I said delay the foreclosure," Audra snapped. "I don't care what the bank says, tell them I'll have new accounts by the end of the week." "You won't," Georgina muttered. Audra spun on her. "What did you say?" "I said you won't have anything by the end of the week," Georgina replied, her voice flat. "You gambled everything on an empire you didn't own. You've been pretending you're still the queen when the crown's already been melted down." Cindy sat by the window, knees drawn to her chest, tears tracing silent paths down her face. The youngest always broke first. Then came the sound of heels in the hallway. 3 sets of eyes turned toward the door as Jessie appeared calm, immaculate, unhurried. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Audra's mouth fell open. What are you doing here?" Jessie stepped inside, the light following her. "You should know, Audra, this is still my home." Audra barked a laugh that broke halfway through. "Your home? You think?" "Yes," Jessie interrupted gently. "I think it's exactly that." Jonathan entered behind her, carrying a folder that bore the Brando and Fuller insignia. He didn't speak, he didn't need to. His presence alone made the truth undeniable. Cindy stood, wiping her face. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. "Audra's been—" "Quiet, Cindy," Audra hissed. "Don't talk to her like she's one of us." Jessie's gaze swept over the room. The heavy drapes, the half-empty glasses. The desperate women who had once treated her like dirt beneath their shoes. "Horace built this place with love," she said softly. "Every inch of it, every beam, every brick. He made it a home." Audra scoffed. "Spare me your speeches." Jessie didn't raise her voice, but the weight of her words stopped the room. "And you destroyed it with greed." The silence that followed was complete. Even the rain against the windows seemed to still. Georgina's laugh came first, quiet, brittle, broken. "She's right, you know." Audra turned on her sister, furious. "Shut up, Georgina." "No." Georgina poured another drink, her hand unsteady. "Let her have her moment. She's earned it." She lifted the glass in a mock toast toward Jessie. "Congratulations, Mrs. Harrison, you win." Jessie met her gaze, unflinching. This was never a game. Georgina smirked, though her eyes shimmered with something dangerously close to regret. Everything's a game when there's this much money involved. Jessie took a step forward, her voice steady, almost kind. "Then maybe it's time to change the rules." Audra's control cracked. "You think this is over? You think some fancy papers and signatures make you part of this family? You'll never be one of us." Jessie tilted her head. "Audra, I never wanted to be." The words cut deeper than any insult. Jonathan placed the folder on the table, opening it with quiet precision. "The property transfer is complete. Effective immediately, Mrs. Harrison assumes full ownership of the estate and all its holdings. You're advised to vacate the premises within 72 hours. Audra lunged forward, snatching the papers. "You can't do this." Jonathan didn't flinch. "I already did." Cindy's voice trembled. "Where are we supposed to go?" Jessie looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment saw not the cruel sister who mocked her, but a frightened woman caught in the wreckage of her own choices. "That's for you to decide," Jessie said softly. "But you'll do it without Horace's money, and without the people who used to serve you." Cindy nodded slowly, tears returning. Audra's rage erupted. "Get out!" she screamed at Jessie, voice breaking. "Get out of this house before I—" "Before you what?" Jessie asked quietly. "Throw me into another storm?" The reminder struck like thunder. Audra's breath hitched. She turned away, hiding her trembling hands. Jessie let the silence stretch. Then she stepped toward the window, looking out at the rain-soaked drive. The same path where she had once knelt, humiliated and alone, now shimmered under the glow of the estate lights. She pressed a hand against her belly. The baby kicked a soft, rhythmic thump beneath her palm. Jonathan noticed. "Are you all right?" Jessie nodded. "He's reminding me why I came back." Her reflection in the glass looked almost like Horace's, calm, strong, unbroken. "Tell your lawyers to stay out of my affairs," she said to Audra without turning. "You've already lost more than money. You've lost your name, your dignity, your brother's respect, and if you're not careful, you'll lose your freedom next." Audra said nothing. Jessie turned back toward the door. "I'll give you 3 days to clear your things. After that, anything left behind stays with the house." Jonathan opened the door for her. As she crossed the threshold, Cindy's whisper followed her, barely audible, but full of sincerity. "I'm sorry, Jessie." Jessie paused. "Then start living like you mean it." The door closed softly behind her. In the hall, the staff watched in silence as Jessie descended the grand staircase, no longer the trembling widow they'd once pitied, but a woman returning to claim what was rightfully hers. Outside, the rain had stopped. A single beam of moonlight cut through the clouds, illuminating the steps where she had once fallen to her knees. Jessie paused there, hand on the railing, eyes lifting toward the dark horizon. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We're home," she said to the life stirring inside her. And for the first time in months, the word home didn't sound like a memory, it sounded like a beginning. Dawn crept over the horizon like a slow confession. The rain had dried overnight, leaving the Harrison estate wrapped in a silver mist that clung to the hedges and rose bushes like breath on glass. Jessie stood at the same window where Horace had once watched the sunrise every morning before work. The city lights twinkled in the distance, faint and far, as though the world had moved on without her and was now waiting to see what she'd do next. Behind her, the house was still. The silence wasn't empty anymore, it was listening. Jonathan entered quietly, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "You didn't sleep," he said, setting one down beside her. Jessie smiled faintly. "How could I? The last time I closed my eyes in this house, I woke up in a storm." He studied her face, the calm there, not the calm of peace, but the steady quiet of someone who's made peace with war. "You handled them better than most would have." "I didn't handle them," she said softly. "I outlasted them." The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Jessie turned back to the window. The garden below looked exactly as she remembered, symmetrical, manicured, cold. But beyond the marble fountain she noticed something new, a patch of earth freshly dug near the east hedge. "What's that?" Jonathan followed her gaze. The gardener said it was a memorial Horace had ordered before he died, for his mother. Jessie blinked against the sudden sting in her eyes. "He never told me." "He didn't tell anyone," Jonathan said. "He was good at keeping things close to his heart, even love." She exhaled slowly. That was the thing about Horace. He thought protecting people meant keeping secrets from them. Jonathan didn't argue. He just stood beside her, watching the mist curl through the trees. Finally, Jessie spoke again, her voice quieter now. "Do you think he'd be proud of me?" Jonathan's answer was instant. He already was. The simple certainty of his tone made her throat tighten. She turned away from the window before the tears could spill. "I need to see the rest of the house," she said. "Every room." Jonathan nodded. "I'll tell the staff to open the wings." "No," Jessie said. "I'll go alone." He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "I'll be in the study when you're ready." The house unfolded around her like a memory come alive. She walked through the gallery first, past portraits of the Harrison lineage, stern-faced men, women in pearls, eyes that had judged her from the day she married into their name. She stopped in front of one, Horace at 25, painted after his first million. His gaze in the portrait was confident, but there was kindness there too. She touched the edge of the frame. "Don't worry," she murmured. "I'll protect what you built." In the music room, the piano sat beneath a white sheet, untouched since the funeral. Jessie lifted the cover, pressing one key. The sound echoed through the emptiness, pure, fragile, defiant. The last place she went was the nursery. It was exactly as she'd left it, the pale green wallpaper, the mobile of tiny clouds hanging above the crib, the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the air. A box of baby clothes sat unopened in the corner. She ran her hands over the folded onesies, the small blanket she'd knit on nights when Horace was still alive and dreaming of fatherhood. The baby moved again, a gentle flutter beneath her ribs. "You feel it too, don't you?" she whispered. "This house, it remembers." Downstairs, chaos had begun to seep into the air like smoke. Audra's raised voice echoed from the foyer, sharp, desperate. "You can't throw us out, you can't." Jonathan's calm reply cut through the noise. "The paperwork is clear. Trespassing laws apply after 72 hours. Jessie descended the staircase slowly, one hand on the banister. The sisters were surrounded by suitcases and boxes, the staff quietly packing their belongings under Jonathan's supervision. Audra turned on Jessie as soon as she appeared. "This isn't over," she spat. "You think a few signatures make you untouchable? You think Horace's money can buy you a soul?" Jessie stopped on the last step. Her gaze didn't waver. "I don't need his money to have one." Cindy stood beside a small pile of boxes, her eyes swollen but her expression resigned. "Just let it go, Audra. We lost." "You lost," Audra snapped. "I'm not finished." Georgina, half drunk and slumped against the banister, let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, you're finished. All right, we all are. We just don't have the dignity to admit it." Jessie crossed the last few feet between them and placed a single envelope on the table beside the door. "These are checks," she said. "Settlement allowances for each of you, enough to start over somewhere far from here." Audra stared at the envelope as though it were poison. "Pity money?" "Closure," Jessie replied. "Take it or don't. It's the last kindness you'll get from me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Cindy stepped forward and took her envelope silently. Georgina followed after a beat, muttering something that might have been thanks. Audra didn't move. "You'll regret this, Jessie. You'll regret ever walking back through that door." Jessie leaned close enough for her words to land like truth. "I already regretted leaving. That was enough regret for a lifetime." She turned away, and this time, no one stopped her. By afternoon, the house had emptied. The sisters were gone, escorted off the property in separate cars, each too proud to look back. The rain had given way to sunlight, the drive glistening like polished glass. Jessie walked through the garden one last time. The roses were in bloom again, wild, overgrown, unapologetically alive. She knelt to touch one, its petals soft and damp, its scent rich and familiar. Horace had planted this garden for her. Every bush, every path, a symbol of permanence in a world that never stopped changing. Now, it was hers to keep. Jonathan joined her by the fountain, hands in his pockets. "The papers are filed," he said. "The estate is officially under your name. Every property, every account." Jessie nodded. "And them? They're gone. For good if they're smart." She gave a faint smile. "They're not smart." Jonathan studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "You've done it, Jessie. You've turned their storm into your shelter." She looked at the reflection in the water, her face clear, composed, stronger than it had ever been. "I didn't survive the storm," she said. "I became it." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of wet earth and rain-soaked roses. She felt the baby move again, stronger this time, a tiny heartbeat against the rhythm of her own. Jessie pressed her hand to her belly and whispered, "We're home." Jonathan looked at her, the woman who had walked barefoot into a nightmare and emerged standing in the light, and nodded once. "Yes," he said softly, "you are." The sky above the Harrison estate opened into blue. And for the first time since the storm began, the world felt still. The story broke before sunrise. Pregnant widow inherits $1 billion empire. The Harrison sisters fall from grace. It flashed across every network, every feed, every digital headline that could carry scandal like wildfire. Anchors spoke her name with fascination. Commentators called her the miracle widow, the quiet heiress, the storm survivor. By noon, paparazzi lined the gates of the Harrison estate. Reporters shouted her name from the road, microphones thrust forward through the iron bars. Some wanted her triumph, others wanted her tears. None of them would get either. Inside the mansion, Jessie watched it all unfold on the muted television, her reflection mirrored in the glass screen. Her son slept in a bassinet beside her chair, his tiny hand curled against the blanket like he was holding onto a promise. The estate was alive again, not with laughter or cruelty, but with quiet purpose. Lawyers moved through its halls, staff carried trays of tea instead of gossip, and the ghost of Horace's legacy hummed through every polished surface. Jonathan arrived that afternoon, tired but composed, a folder tucked beneath his arm. The cameras caught his arrival, of course, but he didn't flinch. He'd become used to being the shadow behind her story, the man whose name no one quite understood, but whose loyalty was written in silence. "Congratulations," he said as she met him in the foyer. "You've made the world remember your name." Jessie smiled faintly. "I didn't make them remember. They just couldn't ignore me anymore." Jonathan's gaze softened. "And him?" He nodded toward the bassinet. Jessie followed his eyes. "Harrison Horace Fuller," she said. He blinked. "Fuller?" "It felt right," she said quietly, "for the man who helped keep us alive." For a long moment, neither spoke. There was no need to. The truth sat between them, unspoken, dangerous, and inevitable. 2 weeks later, the storm broke again, this time inside the walls of Mercy General Hospital. Jessie lay in a white room washed in morning light, her son pressed against her chest. His breathing was steady, soft. His eyes, when they opened, were the same shade of hazel as his father's. Jonathan sat by the window, paperwork spread across his lap, though his eyes hadn't left her once. "You look like you haven't slept," she said without looking up. "I haven't," he admitted. "Your lawyers, your estate managers, the board, they all want answers I can't give them yet." Jessie smiled, the kind that came from exhaustion more than amusement. "You'll handle it. You always do." He hesitated, his tone lowering. "Jessie, about Horace's car, the police." She tensed. "What about it?" He stopped himself. They're closing the file soon, just routine confirmation. Then let them, she said. I don't want to live in that night anymore. Jonathan studied her face, the faint bruises of motherhood under her eyes, the strength returning to her voice. He wanted to tell her everything, but something inside him warned not to. Not yet. Outside the hospital window, rain began to fall again, soft and persistent. Funny, Jessie said after a moment. It always rains when something begins or ends. Jonathan looked out at the storm. Maybe that's just how life marks its turning points. Across town, in a dimly lit office, a reporter from the Chicago Tribune was replaying a voicemail for the 5th time. Mr. Crane, the voice said, measured and low, you wanted a statement on the Harrison case. You might find the official autopsy interesting. Turns out, the brakes on Horace C. Harrison's car weren't just worn, they were cut. The reporter froze, hand tightening around the receiver. Who is this? The line had already gone dead. 5 minutes later, Crane was dialing Jonathan Fuller's office. Jonathan answered on the second ring. Fuller. Mr. Fuller, this is Alan Crane, Tribune Investigations. We've received new information regarding your client's late husband. The coroner's report. I'm aware of it, Jonathan said calmly, even though his pulse quickened. So it's true? The accident wasn't. Jonathan cut him off. Mr. Crane, Mrs. Harrison has just given birth. She doesn't need another storm circling her. If you publish that report now, you'll destroy the only piece she's managed to find. There was silence on the other end. Then, the public deserves the truth. And she deserves time, Jonathan countered. A few months. That's all I'm asking. Crane hesitated. Off the record? Jonathan's tone softened. Off the record. Crane sighed. Fine, but when this story breaks, and it will, I won't be able to protect her from it. Jonathan's gaze drifted to the folder on his desk. Inside was the full coroner's report, the photo evidence, the mechanical analysis, the signatures. The final line read, cause of death mechanical sabotage consistent with intentional tampering. He closed the file slowly. That's my job, he said quietly, and hung up. That night, the hospital was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Jessie was asleep, her son curled in her arms, the soft hum of the storm whispering through the half-open window. Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching her. For months, he'd lived in the shadow of Horace's secrets, legal guardianships, hidden trusts, quiet instructions whispered in his office late at night. But this protecting Jessie from the truth was the one secret he carried alone. He walked to the bedside and looked down at the baby. Harrison Horace Fuller blinked up at him, wide-eyed, calm. Your father was brave, Jonathan murmured, but bravery doesn't stop betrayal. Sometimes it just delays it. The baby made a small sound, somewhere between a sigh and a yawn. Jonathan reached into his coat pocket and drew out a folded note, the one Horace had left him, the one he'd never shown Jessie. It read, if anything happens to me, don't tell her. Not until you find proof. She's strong, but grief breaks even the strongest hearts. Protect her, Jonathan, even from me. Jonathan tucked the note back into his pocket. I'm trying, old friend, he whispered. But storms like this don't die easy. A week later, Jessie stood alone at Horace's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the world muffled by the lingering mist. The baby slept in her arms, wrapped in a soft gray blanket. She traced the engraved letters with her free hand. Horace C. Harrison, 1981, 2024. Beloved husband, devoted dreamer, gone too soon. I thought I'd feel peace, she said softly. But it doesn't come easy, does it? The wind stirred, lifting her hair from her face. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled faint, reluctant, familiar. I know what they did to you, she whispered. Maybe not all of it, but enough to understand that love doesn't blind us, it just asks us to see differently. The baby shifted in her arms, letting out a soft sigh. Jessie smiled down at him. You look like him when you sleep. She leaned down and placed a single white rose at the base of the headstone. Rest now, Horace. I'll handle the rest. Lightning flickered across the horizon, illuminating the sky for a heartbeat, then darkness returned, calm but alive with warning. Behind her, Jonathan watched from the path. He didn't call out, didn't interrupt. He simply stood there, raincoat dark against the pale morning, the coroner's report burning a hole in his briefcase. He knew the peace she felt wasn't real. Not yet. Jessie lifted her face to the wind, eyes closing as the first drops of rain began to fall again. The baby stirred, but she held him close, whispering through the rising thunder. "Some storms never end," she said. "They just change hands." And as the rain began to fall harder, washing over the headstones, over the roses, over the truth yet to be revealed, the camera of fate pulled back, leaving the widow, her child, and the storm that refused to die. And if you sat here, heart-pounding, waiting to see if Jessie would come out victorious, if you stayed with me through the betrayal, the shatter point, and the rebuilding, then you're ready for what's coming next. There are 2 videos on the screen with very interesting storylines that I'm sure you can relate to. I need you to go check it out. Click the video on your screen now to watch them.